Hello, it's another week of the Strettycast, and I'm delighted to be joined by Mike again. And this week we are listing our five favourite players of the post-Alex Ferguson era. So these players cannot be bought by Alex Ferguson or have even played under him. But so, without further ado, Mike, how are you keeping this week? Any updates from yourself in quarantine?
Things pretty much as they were. I mean, the numbers aren't great over here. Very, very bad, actually. There is some talk of maybe an extension to the lockdown in terms of timescale, but possibly in terms of the strictness of it as well. Especially after last weekend, where people just decided they weren't going to pay attention to it. I'm not doing too bad, keeping busy. Obviously, the first column that I did of the Icon series went out yesterday, which is part one of Cantona, which was originally going to be one part. And then you realise that for someone who had quite a short career, he packed so much in for a guy. I think he made his first team professional debut at about 18 and he retired by the time he was 30. He got a lot in that time, so there was a lot to cover. So I ended up breaking it down into two parts. I've already done the one that comes after Cantona. I'm not going to say who that is right now. And
Spoiler alert.
yeah, I'm not going to say who that is yet. I'm sort of putting notes together for the rest of the ones as well. So they'll pretty much all be ready to go. But it's a nice column to get started, I think.
Absolutely, and a great read. Part one is out now, and there'll be a link in the description to go and read that on the blog. So we listed our top five post-Ferguson players. I know you've done yours in order, so we might just do it one by one. We'll start with your fifth pick, Mike. Tell me who it is and why.
It's Scott McTominay. So McTominay came into the first team under Mourinho. Almost as sort of Mourinho's, he was basically used as Mourinho's way to have a shot at Pogba, but as a consequence, because there was such a fractious debate surrounding Pogba and Mourinho amongst the fans, this poor guy became a bit of a lightning rod at the time. Um, Coming in, relatively inexperienced young kid, not a particularly flashy player, but works really hard, and I actually think he's improved tremendously. The more he's played, especially. Pardon?
His range of passing in particular has improved immensely.
Yeah, absolutely brilliant. And works hard, really physical presence, could have done us a huge favour in terms of actually saving us having to go out and spend 50, 60 million on a holding midfield player, because he looks like the guy who's going to do that job for us for the next 10 years. And it's good to see he's a homegrown player as well. He's come through the academy, just gets his head down and gets on with the job. Reminds me of quite a few of the players that Ferguson used to have when you talk about people. You had people like Roddy Johnson, Nicky Butt, people like that. Not flashy, but very, very good. Just got on with the job. And I thought he was well worthy of a place. I mean, I had a hard time when I was going through all the post-Ferguson players to see who was worth picking. Because there was an element of, God, this is like picking the shiniest turd. But actually, once you really start digging through, there's some really good players in there who probably haven't been given the credit they deserve because of some of the mediocrity surrounding them. And McTominay is one of those, but I think he's well worthy of being in there and well worthy of a mention.
Definitely, and it was McTominay is one of the players that I have down my list as deserving of a mention. He doesn't make my five. I think that's purely based on I think he's going to grow bigger and better. And I think if we did the same podcast in a year's time, he's going to be on my list, if not further up than fifth place, because his influence over this season, this season he really became a first team player. And when I say that, he was adding more than just the odd stand-in strong performance that we were all hoping for. When you see a youth player come through, you just hope it doesn't go too roughly for him. And then McTominay quickly became a leader, especially this season with the absence of Pogba. When we started the panic at the start of the season, things really weren't going Solskjaer's way. McTominay became a leader himself and a driving force in midfield, and he does those simple things that look simple really, really well. And that's something he's improving on. And you look at some other players, great midfielders like Michael Carrick, didn't always do the extraordinary. A lot of their game was based around doing the simple thing and doing that right. It sounds like doing the simple thing, but the main thing is doing it right and doing it consistently. And I think that's something McTominay is developing into his game. But the main thing for me is his attitude. his attitude, his firepower, he's willing to fight in his back. And I think most of the players that I've listed in my five, um, a lot of them are in there for that reason. That we seen last season towards the end, a lot of people complained about falling out of love with the team. That the team was just, it was just wasn't a nice team at all. They were dropping their heads. They didn't care. They were high paid players, but they weren't showing that. And they weren't even showing respect to the fans. They'd after a bad defeat, they go straight down the tunnel. And I think that's something Solskjaer tried to breed into his players, that that's not acceptable. That kind of behaviour. These fans are paying their hard-earned money to come, a lot of time to come travelling. And I think this season you see that big time. All these players like the McTominays that have come through the academy are not just youngsters anymore. Important key players and players that you see for the future could be a part of a successful team. And fingers crossed that will be the case. Just before we move on to my fifth player, Mike, McTominay. He was out for about a month and a half, maybe 2 months, just before the coronavirus, and he did return. And it was going to take him a few games to get back into the level he was playing at. Because the midfield had done so well in his absence, and we were on an unbeaten streak, do you think it won't be as easy for him to slot back into that midfield next season? And as well, if we do make more additions?
No, I don't think he's going to have a problem slotting back in. He's one of the things that strikes me. You talk about his attitude. He's actually a very intelligent footballer as well for somebody who's relatively inexperienced. I think one of the things that United lacked in the last few years are people that can manage a game, and he is one of those players that can manage a game. And I do think, for all the faults that with Mourinho was good at spotting players that could manage games, and I think he did genuinely see some of that actually in McTominay, and that was why he brought him in. And I think Solskjaer has seen that as well as the other coaching staff like Michael Carrick and Kieran McKenna. They've all seen that in him. I think he'll slot back in. He'll add a little bit of extra physicality. In fact, in a three-man midfield, he would work really well. I think him, Fred, and Bruno Fernandes in a three-man midfield is a really well-balanced midfield. They all complement each other. They all bring different things to the table. That doesn't mean we shouldn't be adding options to the midfield, because I still think we need to. But I don't think that's going to be a problem for McTominay. He's, as you mentioned, his attitude. He seems like the kind of guy that would relish the competition of having other players coming in and challenging him for a spot in the team. That doesn't seem like something that's going to faze him. Again, I think that is the kind of character that United have lacked. And you're starting to see is coming back into the team again with certain players that you have in the team.
No, absolutely. And my fifth player on my list, Harry Maguire. I know he's a new signing, but a lot of the reasons that we've spoke about with McTominay registered with Maguire too, and even in a more experienced capacity, he came in, was quickly named as captain. But at the very start of the season, I'll admit I was kind of undecided on Maguire. He cost a lot of money, and he was still making some mistakes in games. But I think if you look at the bigger picture and you look at the state of United's defence for so long, a lot of those mistakes are from the players that are surrounding him. We've seen that after Christmas, he really became a leader at United, on and off the pitch. And his whole, the way he's dealt with the whole football's fight against COVID-19 from a United perspective has been admirable. He's been the talking force behind it all in dealing with Ed Woodward, ensuring that asking players to take pay cuts. Communicating with Solskjaer on the whole issue too. He's a leader on and off the pitch, and for that I think he's an even bigger signing, and that's why he deserves, for me, a name on this list, because as we go into the next 2 to 3 years, Harry Maguire is huge to whether this team's going to be successful or not, based on whether we spend right and get the right players in. But the fact he's made such an improvement to that defence, along with Wan-Bissaka, who's unlucky to miss out, and he probably will be on this list maybe next season, Maguire is massive. He's absolutely huge. I think he's been a top-class defender this year at least.
Yeah, I think the perception of him, he suffered a little bit because of the amount of money he cost, and people went, oh, he's not Virgil van Dijk. Well, nobody's Virgil van Dijk. Virgil van Dijk is, I mean, in my opinion, Virgil van Dijk should have won the Ballon d'Or, actually, last year. I think he's that good. But that doesn't mean he's still not an absolutely first-class defender, Harry Maguire. He is. And it says a lot that Solskjaer almost instantly took the captain's armband away from Pogba and put it onto Harry Maguire, because he saw this is a guy that's going to lead these players. I think he's outstanding. His all-round game is superb. The way he manages things is great. He gives us more steel in the air, because people a lot of people didn't realise this. One of our big weaknesses was dealing with high balls into the box. We were absolutely awful at that, really terrible. And he's just instantly has helped solve this problem. The way he organises his teammates as well. He's a leader, really really good player. The only reason he wasn't on my list was just because he's come into the squad so recently. But there's no denying the impact he's had. United's defence statistically is much better this season. Not only we conceded less goals, we're conceding considerably less shots than we've had before, which has maybe exposed De Gea's decline a little bit more because he's had less to do. And when he has had stuff to do, he's made more mistakes. But yeah, really, really outstanding player, absolutely top-class defender. And he was a lot of money. But we were always going to have to pay a lot of money for a world-class centre-half because there's not many of them.
When you say it like that, you're going to pay big money for a world-class centre-back. United already went down the route of trying to go the cheap way under Mourinho, and Bally was already signed. I'm not saying cheap, but 30 million doesn't get you a world-class centre-back nowadays. Liverpool, for years, reluctant to spend big, and then they realised in order to be successful, you're going to have to break the bank for a top centre-back. They did that, and that was massive towards their success. United spend massive on a centre-back, I know, but I just think because he's top class and because he offers so much off the pitch and he's shown those signs that we've been crying out for as fans for a long time. When I referred to this time last season when you could fall out of love with the team from the club we love, they just didn't look like United players. They hadn't got a Harry Maguire. They hadn't got someone to lead by example. And look, to me, like when you're looking for someone to lead by example and you look to Paul Pogba and he's the main one in the dressing room, that's a problem. That's a huge problem. And I think the players that Solskjaer's got rid of, the Lukaku's, the Sanchez, and possibly Pogba in the future, these are players I don't think really ever bought into what Solskjaer wanted. I'm not saying that they are wrong for that, but they're just the wrong people for this United team. He's worked hard to get in players that he believes have the right values, and Harry Maguire is a perfect example of that.
Yeah, I mean, look, this is what Klopp's done at Liverpool. It's like, we can't get Van Dijk now. Do we go and get a cut price option? No, Van Dijk is the one that's going to make the difference. He's the one that's going to fit in best. That's who we're going to get. They did the same thing with Naby Keita. They waited to get him for a season. There's no point in. The problem is previously we've just chucked money and tried to buy anybody, like try and buy marquee names. And it's not that you can't buy marquee names, but I'm much more comfortable with dealing with the problems of having a smaller squad that we have right now and having the right players being brought in. That has been the difference this season to any other season post Alex Ferguson for me.
Well, I think what's massive as well is Solskjaer came in permanent manager last season and we hadn't got Champions League football. And I do believe, obviously, United are not as appealing as they would be if they're in Champions League. And I think the Sancho deal fell through because of that. That's why it didn't happen last summer. But maybe by signing the players he did sign, not the biggest of names, but players to come in and give a kind of a foundation for a team that he wishes would be successful, I think that might, in the long run, benefit Solskjaer massively. But it's massively based on whether they can get Champions League from this season for next year. Because if you add Sancho in, or a marquee player, there's that less expectation on that player when he arrives in because he has good players around him and players that are bedded in and have an idea. Whereas when we brought in big players like Di Maria, who's not on any of these lists, Pogba, who's not on any of these lists, they were big signings coming into a squad that really didn't have a fucking clue what they were doing. They were all over the place. We were top heavy some seasons. We terrible defensively, leaking goals. We're over reliant on De Gea. It was just a mess. So I think Solskjaer has, with some of his signings, laid some really important foundations. And maybe I'm not saying he's the manager to lead the way for the next 10 years, but these foundations should be picked up on and continued by whatever happens in the next 5 years.
Absolutely agree. I do wonder if, just before we move on, whether even if he isn't kept on as a manager, whether it would be worth keeping Ole on actually as a sporting director, just because he seems to have an idea for he actually has a vision and a direction for where the club needs to be going.
Yeah, and
And I underestimated that. I actually first thought, oh, he's just trying to emulate what was done under Ferguson. Actually, he's not. I think United are a much more harder pressing team. I think one of the other issues where you mentioned towards the end of last season the team suffered is they weren't fit enough to play the way that Solskjaer wanted them to play. Not even close to being fit enough. And you could really see that they were just gassing after like 60 minutes. There was the Liverpool game where just players were picking up muscle injuries. And actually one thing that struck me, since Christmas, since December, there's been a hell of a lot less injuries among the team than there was before then, which suggests to me the players have physically are now adjusted and ready for the demands. Liverpool actually had this problem in the first year Klopp was in. They had a lot of problems of injuries because of the intensity demands that they play. I think City had a number of injuries with Guardiola as well. These are demanding, certain players at City have never really adjusted. Look at someone like Mendy, who constantly gets injured because he's just not physically prepared to handle the demands of how Guardiola wants to play. There's an adjustment period. It's a hard way to play. You look at someone like, as an example, look at Leeds United, who look like this season they're going to be able to sustain their push to promotion for the whole season. Last season they couldn't. It was the first season under a manager who demands incredible fitness and a very specific way of playing. These things take time. It's not often I agree with Roy Keane, but Roy Keane was right when he was constantly saying, "Going to give him time, allow him to get some of the players that he wants to get, allow him those players to get used to what he wants." If those players don't get used to what they want, or if maybe one or two don't, then it's not the manager if it's just one or two, and it's quite easy for us to highlight which players aren't really buying into this right now, because the majority of the players are. Even the players that aren't great, they're buying in and they're at least trying to contribute something.
But even when you mention Guardiola and his work ethic with his squads, it makes even more sense now why he'd sell Schweinsteiger to United, because there's no way he was going to keep up with Solskjaer's ways, considering the legs that he was left with when he came to United. But that's a player that should be on. He should when he arrived, you would have said, if we were doing this podcast a few years later, he's going to be on a list of top players from the post-Ferguson era because of his big name. But it's just a shame he didn't come in 2009 under Fergie. Who was your fourth pick, Mike?
Yeah, so my fourth pick was I'll go for another academy lad. I was wondering whether to put him higher up, but I haven't. I think if maybe he'd done this like next season, he would have been higher up. It's Marcus Rashford. Can't not have Rashford on this list. He's been. People talk about De Gea, but I think for the last 2 years, the last couple of years, Rashford has been the standout. And I think he's caught a lot of heat from United fans, which I think has been really unfair. Listen, as fans, we'll all rush to judgment on players. Rashford has been one of the few that I have consistently defended, because he came in at a very young age. I think he was 17, 18 when he came into the first team, because basically he had a lot of injuries and Van Gaal needed a forward and he was brought in. And I think he was tremendous. I think he's had dips in form, but these are dips in form any young player is going to have. It's all part of his development. He was developing his game, making himself a more versatile player, somebody who could play off the flanks or play through the middle, improve his interplay with teammates. And again, we've talked this about McTominay and Maguire. It's the attitude. Rashford's attitude is outstanding. His dedication to self-improvement and making himself a better player is obvious. And he as well, for someone so young, he has become a senior figurehead in that team very, very quickly. He puts himself forward to do interviews. He always comes across really well. He's polite. He's well-mannered. He's intelligent. He always has something analytical or interesting to say about the games that he's just played. And that was a blow when we lost him earlier in the season. Listen, I like watching Anthony Martial. I think he's a lovely player to watch. He's not as good as Marcus Rashford. He doesn't have that drive or the intensity that Rashford has. I think he's a brilliant footballer, and he's going to be. He really buys in, and he really buys into this revamp of the direction and the image of the club that we've seen over the last year, over the last 12 months. Really, he's really buying into that and absolutely buying into not just what Solskjaer, but I think the general direction the club is moving in. He is not only buying into that, but he wants to put himself at the vanguard of leading that change and almost offered himself almost as a selling point for the club to other players to come in.
Yeah.
He's going to be a huge, not just for Manchester United, but for England as well. You know, he'll be one of those guys, I think, down the line, providing United continue to move in the direction. I know it's not it's not like a spectacular star-studded direction right now, but I think it actually is a very, for the fans are really looking closely, really exciting direction that the club is going. I think he's going to be a guy that's going to be winning lots of trophies, not just with the club, but I think on an individual level as well. You talk about Ballon d'Ors and stuff like that. He has got the ability to go and compete at that level. I think he's an outstanding player. I really, really do. But he's only going to get better. The reason he wasn't higher up in this list, because I think the ceiling with him is so high. I think he'll, providing he keeps doing what he's doing, he'll go down as one of the best players this club has ever had.
For me, Rashford, I'll jump on which because he's number 2 on my list, so I'll give him that bit away. Two points on what you said, Mike. Starting off with Rashford and all the praise, and I echo all of that. Some people not long ago didn't like Rashford. Not that they didn't like him, but they gave him a real hard time on Twitter and stuff, and I never quite got it. He nearly fell into the Martial bracket for that, and that's why I want to jump onto Martial. I think some of the anger aimed at Martial, sometimes it's justified. And that's why maybe I prefer Rashford to Martial. I see Rashford as being that Manchester United figure that would be a good model for young players to look up to. He's hard working. He's come in at a young age. He's never let nothing bother him. He's been amazing. I think the likes of Ballon d'Or shouts and stuff. Well, if he keeps developing, he's going to be in contention for them. Absolutely. And if United get better and start winning and being the Champions League, he'll be up there with the best players and be seen by everyone that way. But Martial, I think why he should be in my list based on ability. But why he's not in my list of favourite players is because I just don't see that work ethic that I love about this team in him. I see what I love about this team at the moment is everyone works tremendously hard. Now, in fairness to Martial, in the last few weeks before the coronavirus suspension, he did show signs that he was working a lot harder. I see him track back to left back at one stage. So those questions that I have of him may be gone next year if Solskjaer, if that's what Solskjaer is working on. But I just find Rashford a much more likeable figure. He smiles more, he works harder, and I don't know why it is. Is a case of being a bit of less sulk with Martial. He doesn't get maybe the love that he deserves. I don't know, because he's a player to get lots of hate online too.
I think he's a very introverted character, Martial. But I think what you've seen in the last few weeks, you mentioned his upturning form. I think Solskjaer's worked out how to manage him. But I don't see Martial going anywhere. I think Solskjaer sees him as a big player for the club as well. He's not on my list either. But if he... you have to remember, Martial's first season, he was absolutely brilliant. He really was. To come in, I think he'd only had one full season of first-team football under his belt when he came to the club. He was brilliant. He looked like, wow, look at this guy. He looks like what you'd want of a United player. I think he really suffered under Mourinho. Mourinho cannot manage those introverted characters. Yeah. I think Luke Shaw's kind of the same as well, and you've just seen Solskjaer has teased a lot out of Shaw as well over the last few months, the way he's able to slot Shaw in there as a centre-half and stuff.
Mike, so, do you think that Mourinho is the reason why maybe Martial gets so much hate? Because I think you go on something interesting there. Did he maybe detach Martial from the fan base by being publicly unfair to him, having an unhappy player, making him unhappy? Because the Martial that you're speaking about, the one that Van Gaal signed and was getting performance after performance out of, that's not what Mourinho got, and Mourinho was there, I suppose, longer.
Oh, absolutely. Mourinho has a track record of doing this. You know, when he sees things are going wrong because his management style isn't working, because his tactics are, let's be honest, a little outdated. I mean, it's funny, you're seeing him at Spurs now. He went to third season Mourinho within about 44 days at Spurs. He's doing the same thing with Undembele at Spurs. He only just came in the summer and he's a brilliant player. He's just had issues with his fitness and injuries and whatnot. But yeah, he did this at Chelsea, his last spell at Chelsea. He did this at Real Madrid. who's to say, had he done a first season at Inter, the same thing wouldn't have happened at Inter Milan? He was already warring with the media constantly in Italy. I think he does take a lot of the blame for that, and I think some credit goes to the current management staff for sort of rehabilitating some of these players. I think Marcel, he's just a very introverted character, really. I mean, to be fair, I don't ever remember Ryan Giggs smiling that much when he played. To be honest, he was just one of those players as well, and United fans weren't always. People forget this now because he's long since retired. And you think about the club legend and stuff. Ryan Giggs had spells where he got pelters from the fans. I remember early 2000s when it was a possible, he really had a drop in form. Fans were saying, get rid of him. He was being linked with Inter Milan. He was having all these kind of problems. Martial, he's been at the club a few years. I think Solskjaer sees him as a big player. I don't see the value in selling him right now.
He might be on our list in a few years' time when we have a bigger discussion about the top players. Because if he does have that upturn that Rashford had this season, he's definitely going to be on the list. Rashford's fourth in yours. He's second in mine. This list could be dramatically changed in a year or two's time. And Martial, as you mentioned, is different chance of being on the list.
And I do think actually when you look at Martial, even though we talk about introverted and seems like a bit of a sulky kind of character, he seems to have a great relationship with the rest of the players in the squad. Yeah. But one particular player who I'm not going to mention right now, but the whole squad seems to detach from that particular player. But he seems to have a great relationship with the rest of the squad. So as long as he keeps improving the way he has been and works his way back up to that kind of Martial we saw in the first season at the club, who just seemed to play with real freedom about him, which I think Solskjaer's trying to get that. But you see, yes, you're right, it's been an added work rate to his game. It's not so much tracking back, it's the way he's been pressing from the front, closing down opposition defenders. I've seen a lot of that with Martial in the last few months. So, listen, hopefully, I think if he keeps doing what he's doing, he'll be on this list in maybe a year or two's time. It's just worth a shout. But who's your next player?
I've given away Rashford as my number 2, but my 4th choice was Ander Herrera. I don't know, does he feature on your list? And maybe a lot of people be scratching their heads because
he's my number 3, so we can pretty much dovetail this together.
Number 3, okay. Well, look, some people are there's a bitter taste left in their mouth the way he left the club. He was offered a big deal by United to stay. I think he kind of made it seem as though that wasn't the case and jumped to PSG, which hasn't worked out for him. But I'm putting that aside because for me, without any question, one of the most likeable Man United players of the post-Ferguson era, because he was the ultimate shithouse. He wore his heart on his sleeve, and he made up for not being a world-class midfielder with a lot of that, we'd have to admit.
No, he wasn't a world-class midfielder. He was a very good midfielder, but not quite a world-class midfielder. Technically good, very clever. Yeah, he had a real mean streak to him. But you need that kind of play. You need those players in your team. And he was a leader. He was a figurehead. I agree with the way he left the club wasn't great. I don't think he handled the PR of that particularly well. I think he just...
disappointed by that. He's probably disappointed by that.
Yeah, I think so. I think he just left because he just wanted a change. People forget I know he looks about 12 years old, but he's actually 29. And I think he just thought, well, this is a chance for me to go and maybe play in the Champions League for a couple of more years. Maybe, and he's maybe looking at it purely from a point of view of where, it's like, listen, that's not to say he's not going to play for a few more years, but he's got more games behind him than maybe he has ahead of him at that level, and he wants to take every opportunity he can get. I don't have a problem with him moving. Players move clubs all the time. People change jobs. That's how it is. I just think the way it was handled wasn't great. It would have been nice if he'd have stayed, because he would have been a big boom for us this season, and he stayed.
But also, it does have a factor to go to probably the club that everyone fucking hates. Do you know what I mean? That doesn't really help either. But I have to say, possibly my favorite, one of my favorite Herrera moments, um, was when fucking Gerard got sent off early on the second half. He's only on the pitch a few seconds, and he just had Gerard wrapped around his finger and they're out of him. Fucking brilliant that was. That was real kickoff for the second half.
I always said the kind of players that England lack are those kind of players.
Never.
Who are able to wind people up, really piss. I mean, we actually no, we used to have a few players like that. We used to have people like Ian Wright, who you never got much of a look in because he was strikers. Paul Ince could do
Yeah,
that with people as well, but they don't really. That's the one thing England don't have now. England have lots of really good players now. Probably technically better players than I've seen England have in a long time. They just lack a proper bastard. A real like nasty piece of work. Someone like him, or Esteban Cambiasso, or Javier Zanetti, Claudio Gentile, these kind of players, and there's still a play. Ramos is another one, although Ramos gets caught too often. Nemanja Vidic was terrific at being a shithouse because he didn't get caught that much. People don't realise. And Harry Maguire, I actually have to say, Harry Maguire's shown flashes of that in his game, this season. There was that incident. Who was it? He quite clearly, deliberately kicked in the nuts at Chelsea.
Oh, it wasn't Hudson-Odoi, was it? No.
I can't remember.
I can't remember who it was.
He could pretend that wasn't deliberate all he likes. It definitely was. And the fact he didn't get sent off for it was absolutely stunning. It reminded me of an incident where Johnny Evans kung fu kicked Didier Drogba in the chest at a game at Stamford Bridge. And then the referee booked Drogba for diving. It was one of the best things I've ever seen.
Johnny Evans. Cold. I thought Drogba was out cold.
Yeah, he was. It was a really nasty. I love Johnny Evans as well. Just sort of a brief mention for Johnny Evans, someone that should never, ever, ever have been sold. Never.
Maybe next week's podcast we might look at post-Ferguson departures that shouldn't have happened at that time.
He would quite possibly be number one for me.
Yeah, I'm considering the shit we were left with. You're number 4, Mike.
Well, Rashford was number 4. Herrera was number 3. We've gone through with Herrera. He was great. My number 2 is Zlatan Ibrahimovic. He was brilliant. It was only one season, but he was better than I could have hoped he would have been, to be honest. He was already 34, 35 when he arrived. It really just shows you, actually. I mean, he can really rub you up the wrong way because of this kind of image he creates around him. But he did the same thing that Cantona always did. I think a lot of what you see with Ibrahimovic is just a thing that he creates. And actually, by all accounts, everyone that worked with him behind the scenes, apart from Guardiola, who he did not get on with, but I just think that was two big characters. You saw the game differently, just clashing. But everyone else who worked with him behind the scenes said nothing but good things, really. I mean, he had issues earlier in his career when he was at Ajax. There was that huge set to he had with Rafael van der Vaart, where Van der Vaart accused Ibrahimovic of putting a nasty challenge on him in training. And Ibra turned around and said, look, if I was putting a challenge on you, I'd break your legs. And if you want, I'll break your legs right now. It was the kind of guy he was. But I think that was maybe a product of his upbringing. He was from a Bosnian refugee family that arrived in Sweden. They were from a poor area of Sweden. He had to be tough as a kid. Van Persie was the same. Very, very similar characters. Van Persie was from a really rough part of Rotterdam and played football on these concrete pitches in these cages where it was really hard. And actually, if people don't realise, maybe forget this now, but Van Persie, when he was younger at Arsenal, he had a real temper. And Ibra was the same. And both of them are very similar. When they got older, they used that own experience that they had as young players, the mistakes that they made. And another comparison is obviously the column's gone out this week. Cantona was a very similar character as well. When they got older, they used that own experience.
Well, you have to
use their position.
They all have qualities. These three players that you're talking about.
Very, very similar qualities, I think, as people and as players. Very intelligent men, all three of them as well, and very, very strong ideas about how they should conduct themselves as people, about how they saw the game. But Ibra, the way he guided younger, more experienced players, everyone who worked with him at Inter and at Juventus and at United said, and also in the national setup as well. Everyone who worked with him in the national setup said he was fantastic in the Swedish setup. Said he was great with younger and experienced players. Newer players coming in, he always took them under his wing. He always looked after them. The younger lads at United, like people like Rashford, always said that Ibra was really, really good with them. He handled them really well, and it was only one season, but he was probably the one marquee player that we brought in who was world class. He was outstanding. I remember that League Cup final against Southampton. Southampton were better than us in that game. He won us that game almost on his own. I mean, he was that good. Brilliant player. I think, did he get 30 goals that season as well? About 30 goals. And he missed the last few months with a serious injury.
Could have been late 20s, but like he's number one on my list. And I was reading your piece, the icons of Old Trafford on Eric Cantona, and I was just thinking to myself, it's a real shame that Zlatan didn't come to United earlier. And
absolutely.
For those kind of qualities, because I think back, and it's actually, I find it upsetting to think about Zlatan's time at United, because I absolutely fucking adored him from the kickoff. And straight away, I absolutely adored him. His whole aura. Every player I imagined that played for Man United with him felt protected.
I think because clearly the money wasn't there to spend at the time in Ferguson's last 2 years. But I think if Ferguson had got a chance to sign him, I think Ferguson would have signed him. Those two would have they would have gotten like a house on fire. Zlatan would have loved working with Sir Alex, and Sir Alex would have absolutely loved Zlatan Ibrahimovic. And honestly, I think had he come to United, if you look at, say, when he left Barcelona, I think that would have been maybe an opportunity for us to sign him, and I think maybe we missed the boat, and that's when we should have signed him. Yeah. I think had we signed him then, I think he would have been at the club for almost the rest of his career.
That's the thing, but this brings up the debate too. Whenever we're speaking about Van Persie and Zlatan in the last few years, I do find it hard to call either of them Man United legends, and they're legends of the game. But Man United, because they weren't there quite long enough, I think. But Van Persie argument's obviously stronger. Number 20 was won after the season he came. He was brought in to do that, so he probably qualifies as legendary status. With Zlatan, it was a very, very different time for Manchester United. We were delighted with a Europa League success. Back when Van Persie won the league, it was Premier Leagues. We were in the Champions League. The aims were much higher, a better squad. But don't take that away from Zlatan, because he came into that group. And a lot of the reason that group was successful that season was down to him. And Mourinho came into the dressing room, signed Zlatan because he could trust him. And let's remember, too, there was no problems with Pogba then. There was no problems with Pogba in the dressing room, really. Pogba was underneath Zlatan as his leader. And then the problems grew when Zlatan left. And another thing as well is when we're talking about Mino Raiola, which it's a daily thing nowadays in the blog, because so many of the players are being linked with moves away from Old Trafford. People are kind of hesitant now that we shouldn't do any business with him. And I can totally see why. But we have no problems with Zlatan. No problems at all. He behaved really, really well when he was at the club. And the problems I think we're seeing with Raiola now, who's involved in him? It's Paul Pogba. It's not every single one of Raiola's players is going to be problematic. Some will be. But we did speak in the podcast last week when we were talking about De Ligt, and it's going to be interesting to see how he behaves now in the media. He's been linked with a move away. Will they do the whole Raiola thing and slag off Juventus? They're not going to do that because a lot of his players go there. But yeah, he's number 3 on your list and number 1 on my list, right? So we know.
No, he's not. Sorry, he's number 2 on my list. Herrera's number 3.
Okay, yeah. So my number 3 is Juan Mata, and I just he was actually a player that when I did the list out first, I completely forgot about, and that probably has more to do with that it's one of the further back signings. When Ferguson left, he was the first big one to come in under Moyes in the helicopter that January. But if you consider some of the important goals he scored in his first few years at the club, and it's particularly against Liverpool, he popped up in the big moments, Matt. And the only problem is we probably didn't get the player that we thought we were getting from Chelsea. He was better at Chelsea. He was more consistent at Chelsea. But he came to United as an older player. And I still think especially since Bruno Fernandes arrived, you're starting to see maybe less of being asked of Mata on the pitch, and he can show his influence more as an experienced player. He's been very, very good at Bruno Fernandes. They're striking over a massive combination there before the suspension came in. But I can't not have Mata out of this list because when I put it down to my favourite players, there's few players of the post-Ferguson era that have given me ecstasy, like he has. Now I don't mean in the pill form, but I do mean in the happiness streak. Matt doesn't make your list, Mike, no?
No, he was very close, and I think the way he conducts himself is exemplary. And has he recently signed another extension to stay at the club? I think he has, hasn't he?
One at the end of last season. I don't know, he signed one. That was
So he's here until the end of next season at least.
Yeah.
I think it says a lot that there's never a bad word.
Never.
No one ever has anything bad to say about him in terms of how he conducts himself. He's a good player. I think he has a fantastic future as a coach if he wants to do it. I think he would be brilliant, or as maybe some kind of sporting director, because he's a really smart guy. He has a lot of good ideas. I think I think we didn't get the play we thought we were going to get. It's interesting that, as you rightly said, since Bruno Fernandes has come in, he's been better. Those two work really well together. And I think it says a lot that he's, I think, one of the senior players that when Solskjaer really started looking at the squad in the summer when he was manager permanently, that he was a guy that was highlighted of, no, this guy needs to stay here. I need people like him at the club.
Yeah.
It wouldn't surprise me if he did stay at the club in some kind of coaching capacity. When he does actually retire. I mean, I would be very surprised if you didn't see him as a coach or manager. But I mean, it was a close run thing to have him in there. It just missed that. He literally was number 6 on my list.
For me, the nicest player in the Premier League. Maybe not the greatest player in the Premier League as the chant goes, but when you're listening to interviews and so on, he just seems like a really humble, normal guy and always smiling and happy. And that's maybe one of the reasons too that kind of players Solskjaer wants to have around the squad. He is talented. He didn't just stay because he was a nice guy, but it's important that the young players coming through look up to players like Mata as professionals, and you have to take note to a lot of the young players coming through United right now playing a similar role to Mata and will be developing their games based on him. You look at Angel Gomez, Tahi Chong, young players like that, and like even Mason Greenwood. You know, it's important to have those. This is a World Cup winner we're talking about. Won Champions League, European Cup. He won a World Cup with Spain, didn't he?
He won World Cup, and he was in the squad for the 2012 European Championships as well. The guy's a winner. The guy's an outstanding. He lacks maybe the pace and sort of the physical element of his game, and he probably wasn't quite as quick as he didn't have the pace of someone like David Silva, for instance. But I think one of the reasons we've seen an improvement since Bruno Fernandes has come in is that Fernandes has given United the ability to move the ball quicker. Nothing moves quicker than the ball. And actually, there was that period of time, we had that great upturn period in Van Gaal's first season where you had Carrick, Herrera and Mata playing in the midfield for United. And the speed, and those are some of Mata's best performances for United because the speed in which the ball was moving, he is great. One thing with Mata, when you watch him, and I see this for Fernandes as well, and this is a big difference, I think, with United in the last several months, so they've really started to adjust. You see people like Maguire do it, McTominay does it. I think it's one of the things I've noticed in Martial's game. More, you see them, every few seconds, they're scanning across the pitch. They're seeing what players are where, what passes can be made, what space can I move into. Mata's as good at doing that, scanning the field, anticipating, and finding that space better than anyone. I mean, you've got someone like Fernandes who allows the team to move that ball much more quickly. That it means Mata can play the game that he wants to play. Just pass and move, pass and move, pass and move. And yeah, I think if I listen. As long as he can contribute something on the pitch, I would keep the guy until he retires. Frankly,
Absolutely. And is there who's left on your list? What place are left? I've got my five.
I got number one. It's purely a sentimental choice for me,
Okay.
and it's Daley Blind. I think he was disgracefully underutilised by Mourinho. Should never. You talk about players that should never have been sold. He should never ever have been sold. And he should have been playing more than he was. Really classy player. Okay, not quick, not particularly physical, but technically very good. Really intelligent. Could play three different positions. Could play centre half. I tell you, I bet Ollie would love to have Daley Blind now playing in a back three. He
I've
would
always
be,
thought that.
I
Always.
think, outstanding. He's very good as a holding midfielder as well because he allows you to be a little bit more versatile in terms of like dropping in to maybe make a back three or pushing out to maybe making a full 3-3 or some kind of variant of that. Could play at left back as well. Wonderful range of passing. Again, a great professional, really nice guy. Never ever had any problems with him at all. And it was
Great hair.
interesting. Oh, fantastic hair. Beautiful man. He looked like a rock star. You know, he just saw him. He looked like he should be in a band.
Sons of Anarchy. He looked like he belonged in Sons of Anarchy.
Yeah, no, he did. Definitely.
Great hair. Yeah.
One of the interesting things of Blint is when Mourinho came in, he was really heavily linked with Barcelona. And Barcelona were genuinely interested, but Mourinho didn't want to sell at that time. And Mourinho's own personal relationship with Barcelona is not very good. So that just kind of put the kibosh on that deal. But they were really interested because I think they saw someone who would fit into their philosophy and the way that they played. I think the way Ollie wants to play now, I think Blind would have been brilliant. Can you imagine having someone at the back like Daley Blind who could play passes to be able to switch United from defence to attack in the way that Ollie wants us to play?
There's also the capability of playing Blind as a defensive midfielder, and I think there was times in the last year under Solskjaer where I think he probably would have experimented with that. And the problem with Mourinho was I don't think he even made much of an attempt to find a place for Blind.
He still made over 80 starts for United in less than 4 years. So it's not like he was.
Yeah.
He played a lot of games. And
Europa League, he was fantastic in that campaign when we won it.
Yeah, he was. And listen, for Ajax last season in that Champions League run, he was outstanding. He was a big player for them. He was overlooked, but part of the reason Ajax was so good was the mix of more experienced players like him and Dusan Tadic played up front. And then you had the younger players coming through like Van der Beek and De Ligt and Frankie de Jong. And they were, a little bit like what Van Gaal did when he was Ajax, where he had all these young players, but he also had people like Frank Rijkaard, who was a more experienced player to Marshall Finson in the back. Yeah, brilliant player. I really wish he should never ever have been sold. We should have kept him. You should have kept him. He's still only 30 years old. He still has a lot to offer. I would take him back. I would have him back at United tomorrow. I think he was one of the few signings that when he came, I remember when it was announced he was signing him, and for a good price as well, less than £15 million. That was a signing that made perfect sense to me.
He's one of the players that's on my list of deserving of mentions. There's 3 players on that list, and Blind is definitely one of them. And I do agree, he's a player that I think Solskjaer would have made a lot more work out of than what Mourinho did, which is a shame. The other 2 players, one of them you mentioned is McTominay, and one we haven't mentioned is Sergio Romero. Considering how fantastic he's been as a second choice goalkeeper, by far the best second choice in the league, and happy at doing that, consistently being brilliant when called upon, he's a top class goalkeeper. And he's
first choice goalkeeper for Argentina. That tells you everything, even as a second choice for his club.
Yeah, no, and the way his whole career went though, a lot of loan spells, and is it a case maybe he got better with age? Because I'm still scratching my head at the idea that he's still not on the bench United. There's no one coming in the league or anyone.
Yeah, I mean, and part of me wonders whether there's times I've wondered this season whether he should be playing instead of De Gea, because De Gea's just been declining quite badly. I don't know whether De Gea maybe needs a move. Maybe just that needs a move. But It's interesting.
You want the
Another,
Henderson trail?
pardon?
Are you in favour of Henderson coming back next season?
Absolutely. Henderson would be the number one. What I see him at Sheffield United, he is a fantastic goalkeeper. The thing I love about Henderson as well, he is very confident, does not lack self-belief. He wants to be Manchester United number one. I'd say if he came back, he'd be planting his flag as the number one. He'd be saying, I'm coming in to be the first choice. I don't care how much money you're paying that guy, I'm number one. And he'll be. I think he'll be the England number one as well. He's going to overtake Pickford as the England number one. I've no question. He's a better goalkeeper than Jordan Pickford.
I think he is now.
Much better goalkeeper than Jordan Pickford. And the thing with Romero is, in some ways, you talk about these kind of like weird sort of long spells and stuff. It echoes a little bit of Van der Sar. Van der Sar left Ajax. He left Ajax later than a lot of the other big name players that left the Ajax team.
Yeah.
He went to Juventus. It didn't work. It wasn't long after he was there that Buffon was brought in as the most expensive goalkeeper in the world. He really struggled at that point. And when he came into Juventus, Juve had Angelo Peruzzi, who, well, to be fair, if you looked at Angelo Peruzzi's build, he likes his salami, cheese and bread a lot. He was an amazing goalkeeper, absolutely amazing goalkeeper. And Van der Sar really struggled to get in ahead of him, and then Buffon was brought in as the replacement for Peruzzi. And then he ended up at Fulham. No disrespect to Fulham, he was far too good to be at Fulham. He should never have been at Fulham. And then we picked him up for £3 million, I think it was.
Again, I think another signing. I know we got a good 2 years out of him, but another sign you'd look back and say, "Fuck, we should have got him a bit earlier."
Didn't Ferguson say that? Ferguson said he wished he'd signed him. He wished he'd signed him. He should have signed him as soon as Schmeichel retired. He should have just put the money on the table and signed him. Because he wouldn't have. I mean, I think we signed him at 34, 35. He still was at the club for 4 years, 5 years as first choice goalkeeper. £3.5 million, I think it was. He was a bargain, a world class goalkeeper. In fact, I would say for most of his time at the club, the only goalkeeper that was as good as him or better than him would be Petr Cech. That would be the only one that you can make the argument for Petr Cech at his best. I think Reina was maybe just a step below at Liverpool, but those three were the three best goalkeepers in the league. I think maybe Cech was marginally the number one. But
that's a throwback there, Pepe Reina, right? He wasn't the best in the world at the time, but he was a fucking massive step up from Jerzy Dudek.
I'd say he was a great sweeper keeper. That was what he was. He was a very good sweeper keeper. He was a complete nutcase. Classic goalkeeper, completely bonkers. He reminded me a little bit of Fabian Barthez, but Fabian, we look back at not Fabian Barthez, but Fabian Barthez actually was a very good goalkeeper.
Yeah.
But just the way he played meant, because Fabian Barthez was basically a sweeper keeper.
The self wedgie giver.
Yes, yeah. But he was a sweeper keeper. That was what he was. What Barthez allowed you to do was play out from the back, which was why Ferguson wanted to sign him to replace Schmeichel, because Schmeichel allowed you to play the ball out from the back. Schmeichel could launch attacks, and Barthez did the same thing. In fact, he did do the same thing, but just the way he played lent to those mistakes being made. But Reina was that kind of goalkeeper as well. But yeah, I get Romero. Brilliant goalkeeper. Never ever puts a foot wrong. Commands his area really well. A huge man. What is he, like 6'4", 6'5"? Absolutely tank of a man. Just seems to never seems to lose his cool either, which is a great quality to have in a goalkeeper. Just never seems to get too flustered. Just all the simple things right.
He's more vocal than De Gea is.
Yeah, he is. He's very good, and I'm amazed that another club hasn't come in and tried to nip him, because there's other big clubs who I look at and think, God, you haven't got a good goalkeeper at all. What? You've got one sat on the bench. Put some money on the table.
Not that we need to, because we have Henderson coming through, but I do wonder, because considering he's obviously a respected goalkeeper throughout Europe now, Romero from his time at United, could you tempt AC Milan in getting I can't even pronounce his name, Donnarumma, if that's correct, in return for 50 or 60 million? He's another top class goalkeeper.
He is Donnarumma. You know who his agent is, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. No, look, in terms of I would still look to sell De Gea in the
But
semi-finals.
wasn't there talk in the last year, Donnarumma and Raiola? There was actually a bit of controversy with AC Milan fans, and the agent was bashing the fans or something crazy, or he was getting a lot of stick at the time.
Yeah, because they were quite in his camp were quite publicly maybe advocating for a move.
Yeah.
When there was contract negotiations going on, and obviously, we talk about United falling from grace. I mean, Milan's fall from grace has been far more spectacular than United's. And there is some comparables about the mismanagement of the club, but there's been no. I wouldn't say. I mean, listen, I can't stand the Glazers or but I would never say the club has been financially mismanaged in the way that Milan has. Like shockingly financially mismanaged, where they allowed a guy who didn't have any money to come and buy the club, essentially some con man. Now it's under the ownership of essentially a hedge fund management company, Elliott Management. Just appalling, that season where they breached financial fair play, partly because of we talk about the contract De Gea was signed to. De Gea at least had several seasons of world-class performances and trophies under his belt that he could say that I've earned this contract.
Yeah.
Donnarumma's contract is enormous at Milan. Absolutely enormous. And he'd only had one season at this point. And part of the deal was they had to sign his brother to a decent contract as well, who's rubbish. He's not a good player at all.
Yeah, but when you hear those deals, sign one out, sign my brother, or get my dad a job at the club and stuff. That's like some of the stuff you read about in the 80s and 90s.
I get why maybe as a club, if you're bringing in a player from abroad, you might want to help one of their relatives or someone get a job at the club or in the community, because it means that they've got some family to come over with them and it allows them to settle a lot better. I think that's something clubs have been doing over the last 5 or 6 years, understanding that when you bring players in, you need to help them settle.
Yeah.
Which is why I always generally defended Fred, by the way, who's another player that I think is maybe worthy of a mention for the way that he has stood up this season for United. Fred just had a tough period of settling in. He came from Brazil, then he went to play several years for Shakhtar in Ukraine, and then he's coming to the Premier League. The worst time to come in at United and try and settle in. It was absolute chaos last season. But listen, okay, he may have been. There was no choice for us but to pick him. But I tell you what, some poor performances early on in the season. He wasn't the only one guilty of those performances. It was everyone. But the way he stepped up, the way he has shown real character, I love those comments he made where he insinuated that certain players he felt were being prima donnas and not willing to get stuck in and get their hands dirty. I think he may have had one specific player in mind when he said that. I don't want to name names, but it rhymes with Ogba. I think that's maybe who he had in mind when he said that. And when I mentioned before about a certain player being maybe divorced in terms of a relationship with the rest of the squad, the way Fred has worked and improved and made himself an important player in the United squad now. He's a player that at the moment, if I'm picking a starting 11, he's in the 11 because of what he brings to the team. His work rate is tremendous. He tracks back brilliantly. He has a little bit of that kind of quality that, say, like before his injury started getting on top of him, that N'Golo Kante had, of just constantly shuttling around, hassling and harrying. But he does give you something going forward as well. So that's another player. You talk about players worthy of mention on the list. I think Freddie's on there. He was a laughing stock. No one's laughing at him now. He is looking like a very good player. And also, I think he looks like the player that I think Guardiola wanted to bring to Manchester City, but we just outbid them on it because the interest of City was absolutely serious. They really wanted to bring him in because they essentially felt that he had maybe qualities of a younger Fernandinho, and I absolutely see that. He does have that quality of being a bit of a shithouse and fouling people and not getting booked for it as well. He's really good at that, Fred. People haven't noticed that, but I've noticed him a few times. Just listen.
Is he a better footballer than Herrera?
Ooh, that's a good question.
I'll put you on.
I think Herrera's a good. I think Herrera's issue was he was a good footballer, but he maybe lacked the athleticism that Fred has. Fred's a fabulous athlete. maybe not as quite as good a footballer. He's still a very good footballer. People have to remember when you play.
I think off the ball, Fred, that's a strong point. When I think what I've noticed when he has
His
the ball
movement
in
off the
feet,
ball is really good.
sometimes 5 yard passing and stuff that can be off, and it can actually kill our momentum. But off the ball in games against City and stuff, he was one of the more important players for his contribution off the ball.
You need players like that in the game. I think what he's really good at doing is breaking the lines, the opposition defensive lines in the midfield. Freddie's really, really good at that, which was kind of what we thought Pogba was going to be when we got him, but he isn't. And it was interesting. I came across this really good analysis of that T4 Football did a while ago about if Pochettino came to United, and this was just after Mourinho left, and people thinking, oh, you're going to see the best of Pogba now. I don't think Pochettino would have much time for Pogba at all.
Well,
I think he would.
Pochettino's teams work hard.
And Tifo highlighted Fred as one of the players that would do really well under Pochettino. It's the kind of player. He's a little bit of a Dembele kind of player, maybe shuttling box to box. Or when you saw sort of the best of Sissoko's performances at Spurs in the midfield as well. This is the kind of player he is. They're invaluable players to have. Most big clubs have players like that. I was thinking that Real have this young kid Valverde, who does the same thing. Obviously, Juve in the last 2 years had Matuidi, who's terrific, shuttling box to box. Obviously, the 2 years that he was at Leicester and Chelsea winning back-to-back titles, Kante was actually quite. People realise, just remember the defensive stuff, but going box to box, he was really good. And the big thing for PSG this season, the big difference maker has been Idrissa Gueye that they had in the midfield that they bought from Everton. He's a terrific, hard-working box-to-box player as well. There's a lot of work off the ball, both defensively and offensively, to create space for other people. Really, really good at that. I think that was one of the things that Guardiola was seeing with him as well, is that his intelligence off the ball is really good. Invaluable asset, tremendously hard worker. Hopefully, in a few years, if he keeps going the way he's going, he'd be one of those players you'd be looking to put on this list, because I think he's got a lot to offer United going forward, and we're seeing that now. He got pelters last season, and I did look at him at the beginning of this season and get worried. But I did say last season, you kind of have to write this first season off for him, allow him to settle in, all the chaos going on around him. But you can see Solskjaer thinks very highly of him. He's always been pointed at praising him after games. I think he's really made a point of saying how terrific that he works. I think he did in the derby as well. He mentioned how great he was. Yeah, a big fan of him, and I just like his attitude, and that's, we talk about one thing that we've really learnt this season are the players who've got the right character to help build the next United team around people who stand up and be leaders, and he's one of those guys as well.
But isn't that so important? I know it's probably my third time reflecting back to that point last season when things were going a bit bad for Solskjaer and couldn't get a win, and the players were walking off the pitch. There was people that were actually talking about hating some of the players, and it's justified. It was totally justified, because it was a slap of disrespect. And it's so important that as fans that we like our team. That sounds so simple, but it showed last season how easy it is for that like to become dislike, because it must have been a wake-up call for a lot of the players. They behaved totally different this season, and I think the likes of Rashford, McTominay, those young players that witnessed that, I think that's key to their development for the future, that to always have the fans and respect for the fans at the top of their head at all times.
I think so. I think it's what drives them to be better players as well.
Yeah.
That's a big deal for Manchester. Yeah, and I look at guys like Fred, and that's a big thing. When I look at United 11 now, that was the one shame, of the season being halted when it was. And I really hope we go through and finish the season, even if we have to write off the next season or do like a truncated next season, or maybe a short form of the next season, is that I'm firmly in my belief that I think United were going to get in the top four. I think we were going to do it this season. We had that momentum. We were peaking at the right time. I think by all accounts, Rashford would have made it back before the end of the season anyway. Well, he's absolutely going to make it back before the end of the season now. Obviously, it gives people like McTominay more time to sort of get himself sharp. I'm expecting there's going to be maybe a mini pre-season before the season kicks off again. It would make sense for them to do that. But I think United were going to get in the top four. I still think if they restart this season, which I suspect they will, I think we will get in the top four. And I think the reason is when I look at the 1-11 of United now, okay, we're not on the level of City and Liverpool at the moment. But I think I could put us up there with, I'd certainly say we're as good as Leicester and Chelsea. And I think we're better than Spurs. And I think it is those players that we mentioned. Some of those people like McTominay and Rashford and Fred. I think it is guys like that and Maguire are going to be the reason why, because they're just going to help just drive the club forward to be better and better and better. Who are really buying into what's going on. So I think one of the things putting this list together, well, at first you were like, oh Jesus, trying to pick out 5 successful United players during that period. But when I deliberately avoided picking the new signings from the season just because they hadn't done a full season yet. But I think one of the things of going through and talking about these players is actually does give me a lot of hope going forward. I see a strategy now for the kind of players United want, the way they want to play, the kind of characters that they want in the team. I'm seeing a team that is full of leaders again, which we haven't had. We haven't had any leaders in the team. People standing up and being counted. People putting their hands up and saying, no, guys, this isn't good enough. We need to be better than this. Now I can look and say there's 4 or 5 players now who will put their hands up and say, guys, this isn't good enough. We need to do a lot fucking better than this. You know, we're Manchester United. Let's be better. I can see that in the team again. And, that's the positive of coming out of looking through this is seeing those players and thinking, hey, there's some really good players you've got going forward.
No, absolutely. I think we're going to leave it there. We might come back next week and do maybe the 5 players that we think were sold at the wrong time or shouldn't have been sold at all from the post-Ferguson era, because I've enjoyed this. And I do agree, it does give a kind of hope for the future. You can't see and you've already mentioned players like Wan-Bissaka, who, I haven't put him in my list, but I think next season he's definitely going to be in this list, because I haven't seen a tackler of the ball quite like him in some time, especially I've never seen a fullback quite as good as him.
It's getting better going forward as well as the season's gone on.
And he deserves a bit of credit for that, because I think when he first came in and people said that, right, going forward he's not quite strong, I thought that was focused on really harshly anyway. It was also made out that he was shit at it. And
he suffered by comparison. It was the same with Maguire and Van Dijk. He suffered by comparison to Trent Alexander-Arnold, who is a phenomenal once-a-generation talent.
Yeah.
Trent Alexander-Arnold is essentially a playmaker playing at right wing-back, which is... He's an incredible footballer. That's not even fair to comparison. And also, I think Wan-Bissaka has only been playing at right back for quite a short amount of time. He used to be a centre half.
Yeah, I think he played up front too, as a youngster.
Yeah, so he has to adjust to a new position. We talk about Rashford, McTominay. I look at Wan-Bissaka. His dedication to self-improvement is incredible. His performance, the way he just took Sterling out of the game completely. And then when he tried to switch it around and put Mahrez on there, and he struggled to get a look in as well. That was just, he's an absolute monster. The thing that I like about Wan-Bissaka as well, I think if you played a back 3, he could play on the right side of a back 3 as well, because he has that game about him. He's every week I watch Wan-Bissaka, he gets better. It's like there's almost new things in his game that he's improved. He's like, his positioning gets a little bit better every week. His reading of the game gets better every week. His crossing, getting forward gets better every week. And when you look at his natural athleticism, his strength, his power, his pace, he's got, that level of dedication, self-improvement, he's going to be a phenomenal player. He's still only 20, is he? 20 years old?
Mm.
Incredible. Great buy. There wouldn't have been anyone else better we could have bought in that position.
Sky is the limit for him. But yeah, thanks a million for joining us, Mike. You can support the Strettycast and Stretty News on Patreon at patreon.com/Stretty News. We're also on Twitter now at Strettycast. you get tweets from myself and Mike there. Elsewhere, Facebook, Stretty News, and make sure to subscribe to us on YouTube, as well as Spotify and iTunes. Mike, how can people, or you're just using the Stretty News Twitter account at the moment, or Strettycast Twitter account at the moment. Other than that, I think you're on lockdown from social media.
It's permanent lockdown. Yeah, if anyone wants to get in touch with me, do it via the Strettycast account, because I'm always on there. I'm always on that, and obviously the part 1 of the Cantona edition of the Icons of Old Trafford series is up now. Go and read it. That's going to be going out every Wednesday. We're sticking to once a week, so you can kind of prepare yourself every Wednesday for that to go out. So go and look at that, and if you've got any questions, anything that you want myself and Dale to bring up on the pod, just get in touch. Just tweet us, drop us a message on the Twitter account, and we'll be pretty responsive. We've both got, listen, we're both on our phones, so I'm sure we can get in touch, and it's not like we're going to the office.
This is my office. It's sleeping dog.
This is my office right now as well.
Yeah, thanks a million for listening, watching, or whatever, and we'll see you again next week.